So we're going to move into our final closing session of what I think has been a very productive day. So thank you for coming back and awakening from the food coma of lunch. What we'd like to do now is sort of give some feedback on the breakout groups that just happened. And we'll also be hearing, we'll be giving some concluding remarks as well as we close the day, with the goal of getting you out of here on a Friday afternoon by 3 o'clock. So if you'll allow me, please, I'd like to introduce my colleague and the co-convener for today's event, Christine Giantris, Vice President with the Nonprofit Finance Fund.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone. This feels particularly tall. Tracy, you know what it's like, right? Behind the... we need the mic, so we'll stay here, but I'll stand to the side. Again, hello, everyone. I said hello to you very early in the day. Some of you are not here. Oh, perfect. Thank you. And I'll just reintroduce myself. I'm Kristen Giantris from the Nonprofit Finance Fund, and it really has been a real pleasure to co-host this event today with the White House Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation, and really, most importantly, to interact with all of you. Having all of this group together in one room from a lot of different places across the country who are experiencing a lot of different things but have a shared vision and a shared goal was really a very rewarding day, and I hope you found it to be the same. Very briefly, Nonprofit Finance Fund has been engaged with nonprofits in the sector at large for over 30 years. We have been a financer to individual organizations and do a significant amount of financial advising work with across the sector. In our work specific to Pay for Success and Social Impact Bond, which we started a year ago, we have actually taken a very decided and somewhat different route, and that is to say that we are actively playing the role of honest broker to the field. So our goal, which is really embodied today, is to engage in dialogue, to share knowledge, to build knowledge together, and provide that enabling environment so that there is a supportive ecosystem for Pay for Success and similar models to develop across the country. And so I really, this day was very, very important for us in advancing that kind of thinking, and hopefully for all of you, and we hope to continue to engage you in that way. I will make one plug, but it's really a plug for knowledge and sharing of knowledge, and that is there was pre-reading posted on our Learning Hub at payforsuccess.org, and I encourage you to continue to go there. There will always be new information there, new webinars, new articles, new interviews, new tools and toolkits there for all the different participants that are looking at this model. So I want to also thank, because this kind of work really is important to us, it was really an honor to be asked to partner with the White House Office of Social Innovation to do the work. So Jonathan and his team, Marta and Helen and Caitlin and Amanda, were excellent team members to work with, and we really are looking forward, not just in a co-convening role, but as a participant in the field, to this work going forward. And this is really the beginning of the dialogue, and we are anxious to take what we have learned here together with you and to advance that discussion even further. So I want to talk a little bit about what we learned here with you, since we really did spend time in the morning hearing from different views and opinions on the model, different actors and different players in what this model might be able to be, and then we started to really dig deep in the sessions, and I hope all of the breakouts were as productive as the one that I was in, where we really dug into what's going on the ground and got a real feeling for a number of different things from multiple places across the country. So the first thing that we really learned about was, is there a pipeline for this? Like, is this actually happening, or is this happening in the UK, which we're all looking to constantly to see how that evolves, and in New York City and the state of Massachusetts, and then everybody else is just saying this seems interesting. That's not the case. The impressions that I had in my breakout and what I learned in other sessions is that there is actually a growing pipeline for this activity. People are at different stages, but there were participants in the different rooms saying, we have identified the issue, we have chosen to go the model of, for example, the state of Massachusetts. We're going to use we're going to just take wholesale from them and use that RFI model and RFP model and proceed forward. There is a solid example of a statewide private organization that has been actively advancing the idea across the state, specifically CIB, along dealing with issues of recidivism in the state, working very closely with the state governor's office, and they're at the point of trying to structure. So there really is activity on the ground, and it really is advancing, and the opportunity for us to be able to talk about it as a group, I think, is really, really vital. the issues that came up were also interesting. We have heard, obviously, from the one example on the ground of being recidivism, and we've also heard from other players in the room today that that's an area where people are people sort of go to first. And as I was having a conversation last night with Joe from Michigan, who I'm not sure if he's still in the room, we were talking about that, and we were talking about, why is that the case, and the idea of something being measurable and monetizable and easily defined is important for proof of concept. But people sort of sometimes sit back and say, but it's low-hanging fruit, and we're just going to go for the low-hanging fruit. Well, there's really nothing wrong with that, right? We need something that is really proof of concept up front. We need to be able to hold something up as a model and say, this works, and it's worth exploring in areas where we may not be as sure as to its application. And to quote Joe, he said, and it's an issue. Why shouldn't we try and solve it? So there's nothing wrong with going for what will work early and effectively. However, in the conversations, there were a number of issue areas that came up that I thought were really, really excellent topics, and ones that I did want to share with you. Nursing care and its connection to Medicaid and Medicaid savings. That was a big conversation in a number of the rooms. Permanent supportive housing. We had a very interesting conversation about that because of how it can link to so many other issues that we're talking about, because it relinks to homelessness, because it relinks to youth aging out of foster care, because it relinks to populations coming out of prison. There is a way of sort of looking at a group of issues and therefore outcomes, and permanent supportive housing was something that there was real interest in pursuing, and I know it is actually sort of something of interest to someone, an individual in the room who is thinking of pursuing this. The other issue that was talked about by a number of people was youth and after-school interventions, and how can we use this model to get at the services or the wraparound services to education and youth. And I think this is something that is very much top of mind. I think it's top of mind at both the city and the state level, and I also think it's something that people are thinking that it is perhaps a longer-term goal under this model, but it shouldn't be set to the side. It should still be held center as we consider how this can be applied. The last thing I wanted to highlight, which came up in one of the sessions, but is an interesting model, was the idea of using a neighborhood revitalization program and being able to look at sort of a comprehensive set of outcomes in a place. And how can we apply pay for success in that way? So again, there's a lot of good thinking going on this topic, and I would really encourage, if any of these things are piquing interest or resonating with you, and we will do our best to sort of make those connections, because I think those conversations are the start of sort of thinking about how to model them back in your hometowns and home states. The last area that we covered was, what can the field do? So we've come together here to talk about things, but we can't sort of stop with the conversation. There really needs to be a push, and there's a number of players that can advance this, and NFF is one of them, but we look to partner with others to say, how are we going to create this ecosystem that will sort of support the development of pilots, if it be pilots, or statewide efforts, if it be statewide efforts, or city or countywide? What's needed by people on the ground who have to do the work in order to get there, and what would help them advance more quickly and more successfully? So I just want to sort of run through a list of things that were shared, because I think they were useful, and I also think they are actually quite a good laundry list for all of us to work from and work towards as we move forward in this effort. One thing that came up was, can you give us a toolkit? Can you give us examples of the RFI, of best practices for legal issues, of contracts, of language that you would use with your legislature? In places where you have already started making progress down the path, how can we pull this together to serve as a set of best practices, as a template or a larger toolkit, so that we in county, city, state, B are not starting at the bottom, and we have evidence, so to speak, perhaps not in terms of actual completion of the work, but evidence to our own stakeholders and constituents to say, this is possible. It seems like a mountain to climb, but others have started to climb it already, and we can apply it here. And I think that was very, very useful and something very tangible that we can all work on together. A quote, and this is just a quote out of the room, and I wasn't in it, greasing the wheels at the top. Okay, those people were in the room. So sort of to get the governmental CEOs to be convinced that this is something they want to do. So sort of lateral pressure, if I understood the conversation correctly, lateral pressure that gets those actors who are really going to decide whether there is political will or not for this to believe and start to say, I want to try this. And maybe it is through, it may be through sort of direct interaction with these governmental CEOs. It may be using existing associations or umbrella organizations, the National Governors Association, Council on Mayors, as a way of advancing an idea in a group and perhaps creating a little peer pressure in that community to be able to say, we really should be considering this. I'm holding back and perhaps I shouldn't because my peer is not. I thought that was a very interesting approach and a very worthwhile one because as we all know, sort of political interest and will is as important as anything in advancing the idea. Thinking partners. This came up in a number of the groups. Where can we go to sort of deepen our own thinking? Where can we go to establish sort of a common set of practices? And this relates to the toolkit, but I think it's beyond the operational. I think what people were asking for was the place to convene, as we're doing here, and hopefully we'll be able to do more, to be able, with their peers who really understand day to day what it takes to get this work done, even though the fact pattern may be slightly different in Salt Lake versus in Salem, Oregon. Okay, it's a little bit different on the ground, but they understand what my day is like. They understand what it's going to take to move this work through. I want to be able to think with them. And I think there is definitely opportunity to create that situation for many of us here. And another one, and I'll end with this one because I think it's very practical and it kind of takes us back to the beginning of the day when we're hearing from Robert Gordon and from Melanie Barnes as well, is the ability to leverage existing federal programs. So SC2 was named, Strong Cities, Strong Communities. What is already on the ground and a resource to us at the state level that we can tap into and we can sort of use as a conduit for being able to advance this idea as well as others. So where are those resources already and how do we structure them so that they help us sort of achieve the ends we want, which is deeper exploration of pay for success. So I have to say I was really pleased with what came back from those rooms. And I want to stress to you that although everybody wasn't in every room, hopefully you had rich conversations in all of yours. We are really committed to continuing this dialogue and to the ongoing learning that I think everybody is really asking to pursue and to follow up on from this initial convening. So some practical ways of doing that. One is that we will be creating a formal report out from this entire day, which will be available to all of you, will be available to people that are viewing this on the web stream, that will capture somewhat of a transcript of the conversations during the day, but also really what were the takeaways. Because a big objective of ours and of the Office of Social Innovation was to say, what is being said, what is being raised as priorities by this group of people who obviously have shown great interest in being here because you responded quickly to invitations, you upended schedules, and you got here in a relatively short order to participate. What can we do to respond to what they've articulated as priorities? So what's come out of the conversation today, particularly out of these breakouts, is going to really form our agenda for going forward and thinking about how the field can continue to support you in your work and hopefully advance this supportive ecosystem so that we really can see the evolution of pay for success. I don't think, and I will sort of close with this and turn it over to Jonathan, I don't think that we will see things evolve in a very linear and rational way, and I think that's great. I think the reality, the wonderful reality of our country and our system is that innovation and policy development is locally driven, it is very organic, and I therefore think a lot of the activity around pay for success will grow up in the same way. And I think that is a wonderful thing because it really allows for innovation and an entrepreneurial approach, and a great amount of energy. But we would be remiss if we didn't pull that all together and pull it up and look at it as a whole every once in a while so that people can learn and share and not have to actually build it on their own every single time in every single state and city. So What we hope from today is that this is the start of the dialogue that we have together as a group, pulled up to center, and that we've given you enough sort of grist for the mill to take back home and continue the thinking and the work, but know that you actually have a community to come back to, and one that we really are interested in continuing to support. So I thank you very much for all of your time, of your attention, and for your willingness to participate today. I want to also thank, there's a number of people in this room who acted on a planning committee to get us to this day, and I thank you for your thinking and for all of your help in structuring the agenda and the day. The speakers, the moderators, the panelists were all very gracious, and we appreciate their input. And lastly, I'd really like to thank Rockefeller Foundation as not just a funder, because we know them as that, but as a leader in this thinking. They have really started us down this path more than a year ago, is that right, Justina? And have really looked at this model as an innovation from an investor's point of view, as well as from in an actual transaction, as well as an investor in the field. And we are benefiting from that, I think, all of us today, and I thank you for the continued support there. I will look to Jonathan to bring us to sort of the close for the day, and thank him again and all of his staff, because it has been a real pleasure to partner with them. So Jonathan, I turn this over to you.
Thank you.
You do this? Okay.
So, Kristen, thank you very much for that very helpful sort of readout on the day's conversations. And I think I would only underscore the fact that there were 4 breakout groups, which mean obviously all of us weren't able to be in all of them. But we hope that this is, and it is our intent, that this will be the first in a series of sessions much like this. We stand behind the idea of the Pay for Success initiative. We are excited about the pilots that Melody alluded to earlier today, and it's our intent to continue to support the field and the great work that Rockefeller has initiated and that the Nonprofit Finance Fund is continuing to do, and that all of you at a local and state level are enabling by holding a series of these kinds of sessions that allow us to explore other dimensions of the issues, whether it's the perspective of funders on the philanthropic side, the private side, and other elements of the design of Pay for Success initiatives and what we need to ensure its success. So to that end, I would actually invite you, because in the spirit of collaboration, and as Melody talked about earlier today, acknowledging the fact that we believe these solutions are already taking place on the ground in communities across the country, we would welcome your feedback and thoughts about what kind of sessions you would like to see us hold, what kind of convenings we can organize that you might find useful as we continue to explore these issues together in partnership. As our closing speaker of the day, it's really a pleasure for me to introduce to you Gene Sperling. For those of you who might not know Gene, he is Assistant to the President for Economic Policy. He is the Director of the National Economic Council, and he is easily one of the busiest people in the White House. So we're really quite fortunate that he was able to take some time to be here today to share with us his thinking about where Pay for Success and evidence-based funding initiatives fit in the broader economic frame. So if you'll please allow me, Gene Sperling.
Well, thank you. No, I have plenty of time on my hands, you know, with 4% unemployment, balanced budgets as far as the eye can see. Oh, yeah, not yet. But I will say, but I did want to come over just for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons I actually didn't want to come over was probably for the actual purpose, which is the idea that I was going to help summarize this event, because we all know that is the ultimate of the everyone said it, you know, but you're going to say it again. But what I really just want to do is really kind of pay tribute to this effort and just offer, you know, a couple of thoughts, you know, my own thoughts and our thoughts at the National Economic Council. First of all, I have to start by just noting that obviously many of you saw that Melody Barnes is going to be leaving the White House, and that is that's a great loss for this White House. But I wanted to pay tribute because so much of the social innovation, so much represents the reforms that her and President Obama have started from the beginning. Bottom up reforms, competitive accountability, performance-based, and again, where it's race to the top, our social innovation, that really represents so much of the success, the achievements, the tone, spirit that I think Melody has tried to institute for in domestic policy, but particularly in the space on the social innovation. Secondly, it's definitely the case that in this area, some of the coolest people I know have worked. Melody Barnes, Sonal Shah, Michelle Jolin, and others. So for Jonathan and I, we have to kind of show that the men in the White House can catch up a little on doing our part on the social innovation part, because we've got pretty big footsteps to follow. And I just really want to make clear that we feel that this is very much incredibly important. And I was joking at the beginning about what our budget situation is, but it's directly related here. One of the harms when you go through a deep recession, a deep financial recession, the kind of troubles we've had, is that people are discouraged, and they still believe very much that government can do great and important things, but the bar is raised a bit higher. And this whole pay for success effort raises, kind of basically is an effort for those of us who do believe there is an important role for public policy in leveraging and helping to inspire innovation and success in dealing with our most difficult problems. This is kind of, we accept the challenge. We're willing to show you. We believe that results happen, good things happen, and we're willing to put forward a way of thinking about funding that, which really is says we'll give us the toughest test. We're willing to meet it, and I think that's just going to be extremely important in creating the trust that we need to take on our country's greatest challenges. We've seen different times. We see this in areas like unemployment insurance. People want to help Americans who they think are out there beating the pavement every day looking for work, but they want some assurance that the money is going to people who are beating the pavement every day looking for work. They want that assurance, accountability, that it's going for the causes that it is supposed to go to. When budgets are tight, again, and you're facing such an overwhelming issue of the debt and deficit, it doesn't mean that we can afford to pull back on taking on our great national challenges. It's hardly a time to pull back on meeting the goal of ensuring that there's greater equity in our country, that we are not a country in which the accident of your birth is overly determinative of the outcomes in your life. Those are just fundamental values in our country, and those values shouldn't get weaker just because we're in tough budget times or tough fiscal times. But the reality is we face a tougher test and a higher bar on accountability and performance. And so the timing of this effort, I think, could not be more important. So I compliment all of you who are part of this, and I know anything that Jeff Liebman's involved in must have a high degree of rigor to it, because he, in every administration I've been, that he and I know so many of you have worked to make sure these things are not only achieved, but with a degree of rigor that you can defend. And I think, last thing I would just say is that one of the issues you're going to face, that we all face, is the issue of the toleration for trial and error, the toleration for mistakes on the way to success. And I feel that is something you have to address on both sides. On one hand, If you're trying to do something that is progressive in a difficult fiscal time, if you're trying to convince people that you can still use public policy in a way to take on our country's greatest challenges involving poverty, challenges involving poor children, challenges involving giving young people who may have got off on the wrong track a second chance in life. If you're going to make that case, you know, you're entering into a very difficult field. You're entering into a tough area. And there will be people who will be intolerant of any error, and they will look at your first mistakes as proof to try to undermine your fundamental effort. And I think we have to be intolerant of that type of thinking. We don't try to cure cancer with the idea that every bit of research is going to pay off. We believe that if you are engaged in a noble enterprise with rigor, that there will be trial and error, but you keep trying, as FDR says, until you get it right. You experiment because the value that you're trying to achieve is so important. And we can't allow people to say that for those of you who might be engaged in some of our nation's toughest problems, that your standard is perfection. Because if that's your standard, nobody will take on the hardest problems. Nobody will ever succeed, and everybody will go to the safest efforts. And you will dumb down pay for success. You will take on the issues in which it is easier to meet that bar instead of achieving for a higher bar. And so I think we have to be resilient that you don't that when things involve poor people, when they involve helping those who are least empowered, that somehow those areas that are the most difficult are not put to an unfair test, a more stringent and exacting test than in any other part of public policy or the private sector. No area in life, no great company in life, Steve Jobs in life, our greatest innovator, did not have a life of, nonstop success. There were failures along the way, but it was guided by a certain genius, a certain goal, a certain mission that ultimately paid off. Everybody understands that, even in the greatest private sector enterprises. And so when we're taking on the most difficult problems, of which, we have to be very clear, we're going to experiment. We're going to try and try again. And if something fails, then the way we did it is not worth trying again. But it doesn't mean another way is not worth trying. And I think it's just very, very important that we find a way to communicate that to people who will be looking to dismiss noble, brave, courageous efforts to help those who are the most, born into the most difficult situations or have most disenfranchised. This is a mission we are going to care about and stay at and keep at, and we're going to be very tough on ourselves, but we're not going to allow everybody to put a higher burden on those areas than on any other area of private or public sector or nonprofit life. Now, all that said and done, we know that's the mission you face. So as you go forward on something new like this, you know that you have to be very rigorous. All that said and done, all with the case I said we have to make, you know that people will be looking closely, looking to celebrate the first failure. You need to be honest about the conflicts. Of course, anything in which you're going to be rewarded based on performance means that how you pick those metrics is going to be incredibly important and very difficult, and that very difficult to get right, to get just right. Make it too difficult, and you may discourage the most noble efforts. I spent time in my 8 years off with people who were doing controlled experiments in schools in Africa on how to reduce the spread of HIV/AIDS. And it was stunning how difficult the challenge, stunning how difficult it was to even do a controlled experiment in environments where people, there was no tradition of like telling anybody what your actual behavior was to somebody with a chalkboard or with a clipboard asking for, how many times did you go to school, et cetera. And you would see these incredibly brilliant, brave people, and more often than not, at the end of an experiment, the controlled result, it didn't turn out as well as they thought. Now, some people would look at that and say, again, as we said before, we should give up. How can we give up? But I thought that there were times when I looked at those things, I would think, well, that experiment did a lot of good. They set such a high bar for themselves. They didn't recognize that by doing this, they had engaged a lot more people in considering their health impacts. We don't know what the long-term impacts will be. I saw people who, in getting the metrics right, unnecessarily undermined some of the good that they could do. But we know the other way around, too, when people decide that to hit certain goals, that they're going to, as we know, take the easiest candidates. And if that happens, that will undermine this entire venture. If somehow it becomes to get success, you lower the bar of your ambition, then that will also not be satisfactory for the movement you're starting. So again, I think one has to, in a sense, be very tough on yourself, be very tough on a new movement, know there will be skepticism, be your own most stringent supervisor, analyst, but on the other hand, without apology, be triumphant about the goal and the mission, because bringing innovation and experimentation and accountability and success to our nation's most difficult problems is just an incredibly worthy goal. And to be able to say to those who may believe in the mission but are skeptic about the ability of government to matter, that we're willing to say, we'll show you. We'll meet your skepticism, and we'll accept your skepticism, and we'll do something in which dollars do not even flow out without the assurance of success. So I just want to say, from a larger, in this particular context that we live in right now, where our national challenges are great and deep, fighting out of the worst financial recession since the Great Depression at a time where money is scarce, this type of effort could not be more important, and it's very much, therefore, something that those of us on the budget and economic team support and encourage, and we'll work with Jonathan and Melody and her successor on. And just happy I could be here for a few minutes and make clear that there's broad White House support for what you're involved in. So thank you very much.
Let me just underscore our thanks and gratitude for Gene taking the time to be here today. He's modest when he says in the 8 years off. I remember first meeting Gene in Little Rock in 1992 when he was the architect of Governor Clinton's economic strategy. And he was a key part of the team that led to the economic recovery and the growth we had in the 90s. He's been a part of the team more recently that pulled us back from the abyss when President Obama came into office and has kept us on the straight and narrow. So Gene, thank you very much for being with us today. I also want to take the opportunity to really, again, reiterate and underscore our thanks, first for Rockefeller, for all of the support that you've given to the Nonprofit Finance Fund, for helping to really shape and create the enabling environment to support Pay for Success, and then really to all of you who came here from all over the country, who took time out of your week and out of your busy schedules, and to be so open today, and to be so sharing today, and to help us build this field together. I also want to just point out quickly that we have many colleagues from across the DPC and across the White House who were involved in making this happen. But I need to build on what Jean said about the women who've led so much of this work, because there are 4 of them in the room who I want to particularly call out and highlight. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to start with Senior Policy Advisor Marta Urquilla, who has done such remarkable work to help build the Social Innovation Fund, and more recently to really be an advocate for the Pay for Success initiative inside the government. So Marta, thank you very much. I also want to thank Helen Pajic and our remarkable team of interns, Caitlin Fleming and Amanda DeMars, who've been working literally day and night to make today possible. So thank all you guys for all your work. As Melody said this morning, President Obama has called on our nation to out-educate, to out-build, and to out-innovate the rest of the world. In service of this goal, the President has charged Melody and all of us with the challenge of making innovation work, engaging individuals, nonprofits, the private sector, and government to collaborate and identify creative ways to make greater and more lasting progress on our nation's challenges. So we are very focused, deeply focused, on helping government to do business differently by finding and supporting innovative community solutions that are achieving real results, the kinds of work that all of you are doing on the ground in your communities. We're focused on developing new models of cross-sector partnerships that acknowledge that government can't do it alone, and providing people with more opportunities to strengthen their communities through service and civic engagement. As Jean said, in a time of austerity, where money is tight, the work is more important than ever. As we all know, the situation is challenging, but we're taking decisive action. And in our shop, in the Office of Social Innovation, our work is very consistent with this focus, emphasizing how we can uplift the social sector by strengthening it with new streams of human capital and supporting it with new flows of financial capital. In terms of the latter, I'm personally just so excited about our work to explore new financial innovations like Pay for Success that borrow best practices and design elements from the traditional capital markets and marry them to the unique and important needs of the nonprofit field, so we can consider how to elevate and expand what already works. So to that end, we will continue to coordinate closely with our colleagues across the administration. We will pursue the pilots that Melody talked about this morning to make this work. And again, we look forward to taking on this journey with all of you, because we've said before, and I'll say it in closing, we know that we can't do it alone. So, in brief, as mentioned earlier, this will be the first of what we hope will be a series of sessions. We would welcome your input on where we can offer the most value to use our convening authority to explore the dimensions of Pay for Success that really merit further consideration. So let us know how we can help. And finally, I would just reiterate what was said by Robert Gordon and by Melody. This is not particular to any political party. This isn't specific to any geography. All of us share an interest in creating better outcomes that benefit our families and that strengthen our communities. So we all need to engage together to make Pay for Success work. We'd like to think that today was an important step forward. So thank you for being here. Thank you to those of you on the web who are watching via the web stream, and we look forward to continuing the discussion. Thank you very much.